Hello, Jacket here. Today I want to talk about Diablo 4 Necromancer. This is going to be about my experience and my thoughts on how the summoner gameplay felt leveling up and my journey over to 100. I'll be following this video up with some build guides, so be sure to make sure you like the video and subscribe. Let's get into the video. I played Necro in Diablo 3 a bunch, and I love the summoner mage. And in Diablo 4 beta, I fell in love with having so many summons as a Necromancer. It made me want to start off as a Necro, and that's exactly what I did. So I'm going to go through my journey, level 100, using only summons. And before we start, I'd like to state I hadn't done any research into the class or Diablo 4. I had my knowledge from the beta, and a little bit of small talk from how insane like bone skills are from my friends, and that's pretty much it. I knew right from the start I was going to fight an uphill battle. Expressed to my friends that I wanted to stick to my summons, and they let me know it was a community consensus that summons were not great. So I scanned over the skills, saw the pet passes, and started planning out my build from the start. The skill Raised Skeleton was initially where I put all my focus. You get it at level 1, and it has so many details on it, you really need to make sure you read it in full detail. And after reading this skill, I knew it was going to be very important, and I needed to get very familiar with how it works and to learn this spell because it's going to work with my summon skeletons. Later I found out it works with my summon mages, and when that heal happens and how that heal is going to apply to my minions. Raised Skeleton will save all your minions. When you have all your warriors and mages out, Raised Skeleton heals all of your minions over the duration of that buff you get on your bar. The duration is indicated on a green line in that buff spot that I was mentioning. So wherever your Raised Skeleton is, there's going to be a green bar above it after you cast it, and that priest gets summoned to heal your minions and give them that boost of damage. This is very important to keep an eye on. So as we moved on, we got to level 10, level 12. We let my minions do the work for me. Sat back, my warriors trampled my enemies. I was selecting the upgrades for them to give them increased health and damage as soon as the talent points came up for them. And I just kept healing them over to victory. Through that time, I did start to notice how the warriors worked. Their main focus is something that I was targeting with his core skill. I liked to use Decompose for quite some time as it gave me a corpse on demand as I needed it. And my warriors would swap to that target. It was something I noticed very early on. This also worked with core skills, like I used Blight. It was a very good, I pretty much picked everything that said minion. And so anytime I would hit something with Decompose or Blight, the warriors would actually go and attack that target. And that's how I dictated how they would attack things. A key point that I experienced as I was approaching level 12 is you get the choice of what type of warrior you would actually like. I tried out the defenders, I played around with the regular warriors, but the reapers really are the ones that caught my eye. I thought at first the first upgrade for the reapers was the best, but it ended up being entirely wrong. Upgrade 2, where they have a chance to create a corpse, was just absolutely essential for the entire minion gameplay. Having those corpses to spam heal was no joke. This turned out to be the best decision I can make later on, but that is something we'll get to when we get to the next a few sections later, actually, in the video. I ended up sticking with upgrade 1 through most of the campaign and relying on the decomposed corpse. So I rapidly hit level 15. My warriors were tearing through things after making them reapers with upgrade 1, and my healing prowess keeping them upright. This definitely solidified my choice in the minion build, because once I hit level 15, we got those skeleton mages. They were a staple in Diablo 3, and boy did they pack a punch when I unlocked them here. You started off with the shadow mages, and they have a chance, not a chance, but they give you an extra attack after 5 attacks, and they attack pretty fast, so that was very good for pretty much my entire time through the campaign. And early on I got a power that gave me more warriors, so I'd hoped that eventually I would get a power that gave me more mages, and that ended up being the case. It was very, very soon after I got them, and it was pretty much always on my build. I would later learn that you could put this power on an amulet to get 3 mages for a total of 6, and that's where that power lives on my current build. It's just so good having those extra mages. And then getting the mages pushed my total mages my minion army basically to 7 without any legendary powers leveling up. And it's where the game really started to feel good. Felt like I had a good melee base, a good range base, and then I was able to dictate where those minions were attacking. And at times I was just standing still watching my minions destroy everything around me. There's a public event that has the 3 pillars and you're supposed to kill enemies within their circles, and you just stand in the middle of it and it kills everything. It's quite a good feeling when you get to that point. And this does feel like a good time to address some thoughts people might be having. Jacket, you haven't really complained about your minions dying or not being able to manage them. Well, that wasn't really my experience. I spammed Ray Skeleton as my filler throughout my entire time as leveling up and going through the campaign. My fillers were like Blight and Decompose, as I mentioned previously, where it said minion damage, so I clicked on the thing that said minion damage, and I would try to focus on that and really truly let them work and feel like I was playing that minion build. And because of that, I always had access through those corpses that I needed to heal my minions and keep them alive. And that's kind of perfect because it gets me to the thoughts about the campaign and some tough enemies. I played on World Tier 1, so let's get that out of the way. This is not a review of the Diablo campaign, nor if you should play on World Tier 2 or 1. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page when I say I only ever had one problem in the entire campaign, and it was against Astaroth because I wasn't making enough corpses. I didn't know the mechanics, it was the first time I fought him, and he essentially decimated my entire minion line, and I had no way to really get them back without spamming Decompose, and Decompose was not generating enough corpses for me. I thought the campaign, the normal dungeons, and the open world content was all able to be done easily by my summoner Necromancer. The minion army really just made light work of everything, all the way up to the capstone dungeon, which we easily beat as well. I do want to say that all the positive things I am saying, sometimes I did feel very squishy and very vulnerable to crowd control effects. It was pretty much the only time I died, and Frozen Affix still haunts me to this day. All of these issues were addressed through min-maxing in World Tier 3 and 4, so once you get through pretty much to that point where you get like aspect of the disobedience and even that immunity bubble one, you kind of get through those easily. And I didn't learn about the topaz thing until much later as well, but put some topazes in your armor and you become immune while you're crowd controlled, so that's good. I didn't use the Reaper upgrade 2 for my time through the campaign. I used upgrade 1. I thought it did more damage, and that was good enough, but the corpses came in handy much more. And earlier I mentioned this, but if you use upgrade 2, there truly is no limit to the number of corpses you use at your disposal. It's basically an infinite battery for all your minions to have them increasing their damage and to keep them up. And if I had it selected, I don't think I would have had that one hiccup I had in the campaign. I used the Shadow Mages all the way through the campaign for the extra attack, and I didn't really see a reason to use anything else. At the time, the Cold Mages might have been better for more essence generation, but I liked the extra attack and they were my main source of damage, and I was too afraid to use the Bone Mages at the time because the Bone Mages would basically hurt themselves to, destroying themselves basically. And so because I was using Blight and Decompose to amplify all the minion damage as well, it pretty much just all came together with all the shadowy style of gameplay. Decompose was a way I generated corpses as I needed, and it definitely wasn't enough. But with all that shadow damage, we ended up taking the Shadow Blight key passive, and it really felt solid all the way through the campaign. And I basically, like I said earlier, destroyed the capstone dungeon. I don't even know the mechanics of either of the capstone dungeon because both times I've done them, it's just been obliterated. I carried a few friends through some of theirs, and I still don't know what those bosses do, unfortunately. And now that the capstone dungeon was completed, we got to World Tier 3. This means we now had access to Hell Tides. We already had access to the Tree Whispers, but we could do those and the Nightmare Dungeons. And it was at this point I found one other key thing about the builds, is that suppressors are the absolute worst for this build. Take what you think you know about suppressor and throw it out the window. You think Whirlwind snapshotting outside the bubble is bad? It's a cakewalk to fix compared to this minion issue with suppressors. The mages have no AI to determine if they're hitting an enemy or not and dealing damage. They're just attacking basically. And so they'll never move into the bubble, not on their own. The bone mages will destroy themselves attacking the bubble, It turned out to be a saving grace though, because if you just let them defeat themselves, you can just spawn them inside the bubble for the suppressor, and then they'll pretty much couple shot it there, like 3 or 4 hits instead. And if you're using the cold mages or shadow mages, you basically had to like run past and like jiggle your mages into the bubble to drag them into it. And it was honestly one of the worst experiences I had, and it still haunts me at level 100, just like the cold affix. Cold and suppressor were both not fun. And I was also initially worried about getting into World Tier 3. Playing on World Tier 1 with basically no challenge might have been the main cause of it, but to my surprise, it was just more the same. The minions were obliterating everything in sight, I was just standing around healing them, and it was around level 55 that I found out that the Reapers were going to be able to make my corpses for me, and I chose to use Upgrade 2. And I realized I haven't mentioned the Golem up to this point, and there's a reason for that. The early level Golem experience wasn't super fantastic. It was cool that they had a taunt and to tank my enemies, but that didn't really feel that great. I didn't really have any thorns for them to really benefit from that. And then you level up a little bit more and you got the Iron Golem, and the Iron Golem looks really cool for one. And then they have this really cool slam attack that makes things vulnerable. And it was a good source of applying vulnerable for a while, but it didn't feel all that great. It wasn't super damaging. And you only get one of them. You can't have more golems. You can't have like a golem army. So that was just one golem hanging out with the rest of the skeletons. And during this time, I was trying to max out my minion damage, and we tried the blood golem for a little while, but the AOE wasn't super good, and sometimes it hit really hard depending on what level I was. But I ended up settling on the bone golem because I liked the taunt. It was like having a tank, and I did use thorns for quite a while. I got a razor plate and I used thorns for quite a bit, and it was hilarious to watch things one shot themselves off my golem. So that was also fun. But otherwise, you can't go wrong with the Iron Golem Upgrade 2 or the Bone Golem Upgrade 2. Going back to leveling, as we were approaching 65, I solidified my build. I landed on Reapers, Bone Mages, and Bone Golem. The Reapers were the minion battery for the mages, and the Golem was the tank. I was basically my own 5-man dungeon team. Me and the warriors were the healers. The warriors were like my mana to keep them up. I had the mages be my DPS, and the golem was my tank. With this setup, I never experienced any issues with my minions. And if the mages attacked to their own demise, I had plenty of corpses to resummon them, and I had corpses anyways to heal them to keep them from hurting themselves. And if something was strong enough to kill any minions, I had Army of the Dead, or later on we found out that Blood Mist was a really good tool to have, and we will have this information out in the build guide later on. But Blood Mist generates at least 3 corpses, and even if you get one warrior back up, that warrior can generate more corpses for you, so you really only need one single corpse to get the whole group back up. And so that was basically enough to get them back in the fight. And so we round out now, finishing the game to 100. I thought a lot about what to put in this section. The capstone dungeon was also so easy that as I said before, I still don't know what Elias's moveset is, and I'm rapidly approaching it on my hardcore summoner, Necromancer, which has me a little worried, but I kind of want to take it in blind, and if he takes me out, he takes me out. But we'll see. We'll get to that bridge when we come to it, and we'll start talking more about hardcore on this channel more. World Tier 4 did feel the same as World Tier 3. The minions were just absolutely shredding everything. Taking the Cult Leader Paragon board was a must, as it had minion damage and minion defense. If you throw that Dead Razor glyph in that spot, and you get that to level 15 as your priority, your minions are basically unkillable at that point. Which leads me to leveling up through Nightmare Dungeons, so that I can get those glyphs to level 15. That was my next route. I did not want to be left behind for the power that was available. And this is where I faltered looking things up. The journey from 7100 was not hard by any means, but it did take a lot of time. And I did find myself wanting to kind of perfect everything with the minion build. So I searched for the armor stats on the D4 Planner website, what can roll in each spot, and started putting together a fully fleshed out build. And as I keep mentioning throughout this, we'll just keep doing our own plugs here, but eventually, here shortly, the minion build will be coming out. And it was just a grind that we let the minions like do their thing. And speaking of minions, my minions just kind of put the other minions of hell into a blender. And that's really what gets you to level 100. Just going through and killing as many monsters as possible. I do think that the biggest power spike I got, and it wouldn't be much of a minion retrospective without mentioning this, but there's a unique ring called the Ring of Mendown, and it just absolutely changes everything about how the minions operate. I didn't even know it existed when I got it. I thought it sucked initially. 10% chance on a lucky hit? Well, what does lucky hit do? Lucky hit's a chance on a chance. And it didn't seem that great. It was only like 14,000 damage on the tooltip I saw. But I learned that that was not the case. That 14,000 damage by this multiplier, add that damage, add that multiplier, ended up turning into 1 to 2 million damage per proc on that ring. And it was actually some of the most fun I've had playing the minions, is getting those procs and just pulling as many things together as possible and just watch them pop with the millions just popping up on your screen. It feels very, very good. Getting that ring did change everything, and you'll pretty much use that ring in one of your slots until the end of you being a summoner necromancer. It's also worth to note that that ring will proc not just on the one minion's attack, it procs on all of them, and I had 13 of them. So a 1 million proc, if all the modifiers were right, ended up being like 13 million damage. On bosses, it was very common for them to go from what looked like being tickled from my 100k mage hits to, oh my gosh, that boss died instantly while I had 3 other people in my party. So, going from, level set like 70 onward, I had most of the gear that I wanted. By 70, 80, we got the ring. It wasn't much. You were just basically grinding out dungeons, and it's fun to group things up and watch them explode. Saw a cool bunch of mages doing similar effects that I was doing. You'll see throughout the gameplay that I have up for you guys. But that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the Summoner. I think it's very fun to play, and if you want to do minions, it's very viable to do from level 1. Yes, you can focus on them from level 1 and have no problems. I'm doing it on a hardcore character. It does have some very apparent weaknesses like suppressor and lack of control over your minions, but as long as you spam that raise skeleton button, keep your minions up, keep them healed, they will play this game for you until you're level 100 basically. So, thank you so much for watching. A build guide is coming, as I mentioned several times, for the Summon Necromancer. We'll also have a hardcore Summon Necromancer, so be sure to subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.